the actual piece I'm working on. This, of course, will be frustrating for those of you that would like it to be so simple that you could just fit this into place. Now, again, as always, you want to kind of do a test fit. And I found the best way to do that was to slide it in, push it around a little bit, see how it fits. If it gets a little stuck in there, you should at least hopefully have a tool that'll help you pull it out. In my case, once again, the nail file becomes all important. Now, I know that it's a little weird to see something like a nail file being used as a cardstock modeling tool, but it has its uses. A lot of them, surprisingly. I use it for everything from scoring to gluing. Now, you can see that the more you handle and use this, the more warpy it becomes. This is the same problem with a lot of furniture. Now, I've got this piece here. I'm pretty sure it fits. I don't need to mark a specific side. Sometimes these pieces don't turn out square. And when you do your measurement, you'll have to do one side a little bit wider than the other. So that when you fit it in, you're going to have to test fit it and then make a mark on the side and the same side that you're going to be gluing it to. This will help you to figure out later where you're going to be lining this piece up. Now, you can't always expect the black to be on the bottom if you do off-cut measurements. It doesn't work that way. Now, obviously, this piece is not going to hold itself in there, and no matter how much glue I use, a little bit of handling, and it'll probably pop out. So making tabs is an amazingly simple process. We'll just push these aside for the moment, and I'll quickly grab a sheet of actual terrain here, just to show you how easy this process is. The wonderful thing about WorldWorks is you get a lot of scrap. Now, to make a lot of tabs, especially if you've got to do more than one, in this case I'm going to probably need 4, and they're going to all need to be a specific length. Now, they don't have to be too deep. Tabs are pretty good. Now, first thing you want to do is line up your ruler. You don't need a straight outside edge or inside edge for your cuts. What you want to do is you want to score the paper. Now this is important. This obviously has to be nice and straight. And simple enough, I use the point of this, or I take my needle point and I drag it backwards across it like this. Once or twice is usually enough. Now, take your ruler and line it up again. It doesn't really have to be straight, but it helps if it's at least a little bit. And cut out your tabs. Look at that. You've got several different tabs that you can use to make this project. Now hopefully you could still hear me when I turned around. Now fold the entire thing quickly just to give it all in one go an easy scoring. Now cutting it's pretty simple. Obviously it's got to fit this piece here. So what you do is you just quickly line it up. Now remembering you don't have to go to the edges. In this case I'm just going to make 4 general size tabs, so one's going to be here. And I will probably need to score another section, as is obvious. And I know this seems a little long, but believe it or not, you can actually do this in 2 tabs or 3 tabs. You can shorten it, you can use a bunch of little tabs. I find using a bunch of large tabs is probably the easiest method. Now, I've got 3 of my tabs, so I'll have to quickly, obviously, score out another piece. Now, if you're doing edging at all, this is not necessary because this part of the build won't be visible. But I do recommend that you edge this piece before you apply the tabs to it, mostly because one of the things I've discovered about glue is it does not like ink, it does not take ink, it does not hide ink, it does not cover it. So one of the reasons I'm one of the preachers about edging your models before you build them is simply because glue that overruns out of your tabs or folds will make for a very messy edging project afterwards. If you do it beforehand, obviously, it works much better. Now then, quickly, again, this is more of an optional thing. You don't necessarily have to have the whole thing bent before you cut it. You can do the cuts beforehand and then bend it afterwards. Now, I don't know about most of you, but I have developed a love of this new Uhu glue called Twist and Glue, mostly because it has a dual applicator method. It can be used as short or as wide. I don't really find I like the wide, because wider just means there's more of a chance for it to warp or bend. Now, all I should need for this part of everything is my tabs, ends and sides, my piece for the bottom. This, once again, will become a very handy tool very shortly. And to edge my piece. Now, in this case, it's not important. The edging is not going to be that noticeable when it is seen, because it's a bottom piece. It's meant to sit down on stuff, so I recommend using a black. In this case, I'll use the Expo markers for whiteboard. And the reason I use them is because they have such a good heavy flow that they sink into matte board really quickly. If you're using the black on black foam core, you probably can avoid this whole process. You may even be able to avoid the tabs, considering the thickness of the material, as long as you hold it down to the table long enough for it to get a good flat setting, and you make sure that you push the sides up against the foam core so it's nice and even. Now, this piece looks black from all angles relating to the bottom. Now we take our glue, and we take one of our short tabs, and normally I would fast forward through this process, mostly because it's long, boring, takes time. But today I don't have the skills on a computer. Now, one of the ways to line up the tabs here is, when you put it towards the end of the page, fold it over. And as I said, glue's going to leak out the end, don't worry about it. Obviously, that means I put a little bit too much on, but this won't interfere with my edging because I've already pre-edged. Push it down, and there you go. You have yourself a little tab attached to. Now, this tool is very useful for fine-tune adjustments. If I wanted to push this tab out, say, I can push it in various different points. If I wanted to push the whole tab out, I can line up the inside edge and grab the top and just push it like this. Now, the other thing it's really useful for is very fine-tuned, tight glue flattening, where the glue bonds. Now, the funny thing is, that's dry. I had enough time to manipulate it, and this piece will now tear if I try to pull it off. So we repeat the process with all four sides. Bear with me. I apologize for how long this will actually take. Now, you want to make sure, at least in the case of basing it, that all the glue is spread out evenly, so that when you put it on, it gets a nice tight bond. Now, whatever glue stick you're using, this of course will work. Some you'll have to hold longer than others. Another nice thing about this one is I don't really need this tool yet, because while I'm doing this, when I fold the tab back and down and push on it, I'm pushing on both sides, and I can visually see along the ledge here that I've got a nice perfect lineup. Now when you fold this up, you've got yourself another tab. Just carry on repeating the process. Hopefully I'm not forgetting anything, or I'll feel like a real dunce later. Especially considering I'll probably have to redo this video. Tabs, tabs, tabs. Now I know this seems a little complicated, but it actually goes pretty quickly once you get it going. And this glue I love. It dries fast. Now if you don't have a glue like this, obviously you're going to have to wait a little while until your glue is more or less dry and your tabs are stable. And the best part about this is I can lay it down on the inside, work it towards the edge, lining it up everywhere, get a nice clean perfect fold, push it down, fold it up, and if I look at it from the bottom, I shouldn't be able to see any of the tabs. If I do a little bit of adjusting, pull them out of sight. And this is moderately important for lining up. Now, there you go. You've got a bottom piece. Very easy to make, very simple. Now, getting it inside is a little bit of a trick sometimes. The corners can catch, little stuff like that. Of course, like I said, this piece is dry. I can now put it immediately into usage. So I applied the glue around all 4 edges. Now one of the nice things about this glue is it stays wet until it comes into contact with something. But now this is not necessary, but as you can see here, I'm actually applying glue along the mat board edge. This I find actually helps in firming up the base of the piece and making it a far more permanent structure. It doesn't have to be something you can do, but it works really well. Remember, of course, that these tabs on the inside are going to be unreachable. You're not going to be able to glue them, push them down, do anything to make sure they're more secure. So when you're lining it up, you're going to want to make sure it's pretty much as tight and as comfy and as good a fit as you can, because if the tabs are loose, anything can happen. And one more edge here, really quickly. What I love about this glue stick is that it's so easy to apply to small tabs, edges, corners. It's a very fine needle-like hole. Now, quickly bend all your tabs a little bit out so that you've got yourself a nice fit. If you're worried about it sticking to your table or getting glue on your table, obviously put something down. I'm not. I got around that a while ago. Now take your finished top piece. As you can see, the top is now all dried and is nice and solid, will hold miniatures. And what you do is you just kind of pop it on one side. Helps if you can actually pick it up. You're going to get a little glue on your fingers. There's not a hell of a lot you can do about that. Line up the bottom edge and then pop the top edge in. Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky and don't seem to fit right, and you'll get all confused. Well, don't. It's always simple enough to fix. This is where this becomes very handy, is for getting folds and corners in where they're not going in like I want them to. In this case, I've now got this corner in. Double check all 4 of your corners to make sure they're in. And you can see that it hasn't completely bonded on the sides. This is one of the reasons I highly recommend doing the glue along the edges. And you also want to make sure that your piece isn't sinking in anywhere like it is here on mine. So I will quickly pull that back up, realign it. It's actually great these mistakes are happening, because as they happen, I can cover them and make things work for everybody. One of the problems is the longer it takes, the harder is it going to be for you to maneuver the piece, especially with the glue drying. So you do want to make sure that this goes pretty smooth and pretty fast. Now that's an odd thing, but easy enough to fix. Now, as I said, I applied glue around all the outside edges, so I'm just quickly pushing it down and making sure that all the paper bonds to the sides. We've got a little bit of a dip here. Again, I'll just pull this up a bit if I can. This tab may have actually fully dried. If it has, there are easy enough ways to fix it. And just give it a moment, make sure all your little edges go dry. We've got some good stuff going on here. The other great thing about the nail file is it's got exactly the kind of edge you need to grab the sides of paper or cardstock for pulling up and out. Now, it's funny, I didn't have this much fun when I did the Caveworks risers, but now, unfortunately this video is getting a little bit long, so I'm going to have to do a part 2 for other objects, but there you go. Now we've got yourself a nice little box fold object. Now, the sides are still pretty firm. They stay nice and straight. You've got yourself a flat top that can support, of course, heavy miniatures without sinking. This method, again, works for both mat board and foam core. And as you can see here, quickly to one side, I've got a variety of different Caveworks risers here. Now, these ones right in the foreground are risers I've actually done my hollow bottom with. Now, as much as I love these, I now end up using them mostly for base pieces. They don't ever stack on top of other things because it just doesn't work that way. But these wonderful little objects are very stackable, quickly placed, can be put on any board in any shape you want. You'll have no issues setting it up. You can line them up, you can square them off, you can stack them, you can place